Greetings. Hello, everyone. We hope that you are well, reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual strength today. And happy that you have decided to join us for this hour of this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by All African People's Revolutionary Party. Same time, same platforms every week. We do this program for 6 years now and continue to do our absolute best to bring truth to this society of backwardness and poor information and poor behavior. So we're glad that you're here to join us for this week's episode title, which is Marcus Garvey and the Watts Rebellion. What are the similarities between the two? What are the connections between the two? And it's interesting because, we get tons of hate mail, and someone reached out a few days ago and this poor lost soul was saying that, why do you always talk about black stuff? And I said, well, first, that's not true. But even if it were true, the reason why we talk about our people, our history, our struggle is because the fact that you could even ask that question is an example of the consistency of white supremacy. Because if we had this program for 6 years and we were every week talking about how to prepare European dishes from a chef standpoint or how to travel to Europe, you wouldn't say a word about that. But it's just the fact that when we talk about the African struggle, African culture, African people being free, then that you've been conditioned to see that as a threat to your existence. It isn't. It actually would enhance your existence, but that's how you've been trained to see it, and you're too intellectually lazy to try to see it any other way. So this is why we come with these types of topics. And based on the fact that people continue to watch this program, it tells us that we definitely need to continue. And when we started out in March of 2020, my thought was that we would do this for maybe a couple of weeks, a couple of months, as long as the pandemic would last and people were basically indoors and looking for things to do. And it's proliferated since that time. So we continue proudly, and we're glad that you've joined us. We start by giving honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere whose struggle to regain these lands is the correct struggle. And of course, we're talking about the actual indigenous people, the people who descend from the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Incas, the Plains indigenous people. These are the rightful heirs of this land. And we acknowledge their struggle for justice, and we respect that. And equally so, we respect our African ancestors who have continued to struggle for our liberation. And we understand because we're not stupid people. So we know that when we say we support indigenous struggle, every blow they strike against the same enemy that's causing problems in our lives, that makes it easier for us to succeed with our struggle for forward human progress. And every blow that we strike, it makes it easier for them. So, only a stupid person would look at that and say, well, I don't care about anybody else's struggle, but my own. If you say that, then you really don't care about our struggle because you don't have any scientific understanding about how victory is waged. Certainly not revolutionary victory. You know nothing about that. So we don't separate it in that sense. We separate it in the sense that our African ancestors deserve their recognition for their sacrifices and our ability to be there as a result of that. So we're thankful for that. And we do everything we can to contribute to the legacy that they've given us. And this program, Our Ancestors' Voices, is sponsored, like I said, by AAPRP and the All African People's Revolutionary Party. It's a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party with a base in Africa. It's not a dream. It's not a vision. It's not it's a vision, but it's not just a vision. It's not an idea. It's not just an idea. It's actual work on the ground happening to unite African people all over the planet Earth. And this work is happening where we speak Swahili, where we speak English, where we speak French, Spanish, Portuguese. This work is happening where we speak German, where we speak all of these languages. It's happening. And this is not just something someone told me. I've been to areas of the world where all of those languages are the dominant languages spoken and participated in this work. So I know that the work is taking place. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism, well, first, Pan-Africanism is correctly defined as one united socialist Africa. We see that as the solution that our people face all over the planet Earth. And so we're solution focused. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa, it's outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. The cover page, which is on the screen, hopefully you're able to see it, because you miss a lot if you're not able to see what we're presenting. But it's there. And in that book, he lays out the strategy to achieve revolutionary Pan-Africanism. And that's the guide that we use for our work. In this particular program, Our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and my daughter, Dr. Shakura Umi. Shakura is not with us currently. She's experienced some technical difficulties. So she may join, but it might just be me. But we are, of course, organizers within the APRP and working to fulfill our Pan-African reality. So I'll get us started and just say we want to talk about Marcus Mosiah Garvey for a second. Of course, his born day is coming up tomorrow, actually. 1888, he was born in St. Anne's, Jamaica, as the screen says. And he was very interested in African liberation as a very young man. He understood it, even in Jamaica, that he had his liberation, his forward progress for the people in Jamaica was tied to what happened to African people everywhere, not just in Jamaica, not just in St. Anne's Bay. Imagine that if he would have only thought, well, all we got to do is bring some progress to St. Anne's Bay, and that's all we need to. No, he understood that the problems that they were facing in St. Anne's Bay, that they were facing in Jamaica, that they were facing in the Caribbean, that they were facing in the Western Hemisphere, that we are facing in the world, were tied together. And so he sought out information to get a better understanding of that. And one of the things that he wanted to do was read the book by Booker T. Washington entitled Up From Slavery. And so he did that, and he became very interested in coming to the U.S. to meet Booker T. Washington. And in 1915, Garvey founded, along with Amy Ashwood Garvey, his then wife, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA. And also that same year, he traveled to the U.S. with the intention of finding and meeting Booker T. Washington. But by the time Garvey got to the U.S., Booker T. had already made his physical transition. So Garvey made his way to New York City. And again, he was able to do a lot of this work with his second wife, Amy Jott Garvey, and they were able to really initiate the UNIA foundation primarily from New York City, honestly. And so they did that. They built that there, and they began to build chapters for the UNIA all over the world. Now, the UNIA's basis was that we're African people, and that wherever we go, it's only going to be connected to where Africa goes. And all of their slogans reflected that. One God, one aim, one destiny. Africa for the Africans. These are things that Garvey initiated. He saw that we needed one international flag. So he created the red, black, and green flag as a way of uniting us as African people. There's nowhere on earth where we have gained power, even in our small micro communities, by separating ourselves from the rest of our people. That has not happened anywhere. And the people here, African people here in this backward country that want to separate us from the rest of African people, they have no plan for how they're going to translate their vision into power for African people. Even in the U.S., they have no plan to do that. They're not even attempting to articulate a plan to do that. They have no plan by separating us from the majority of African people on earth here in the U.S., how that's going to reduce police terrorism against our communities, how it's going to reduce poverty, healthcare disparities. They have no plan for how it's going to address the unemployment issues that we systemically face. They have no plans for any of those things. The housing crises that we face, the mass incarceration, they have no plan for any of that. So if you are looking at these people and listening to what they have to say, that's the question you have to ask. How is what they're talking about going to change the conditions for us, even in this country, for the better? Now, we can tell you, and we've done that many times. I told you we've done this program every week for 6 years. So you have to do the research, go back and check the episodes for our ancestors' voices. We've done many programs talking about Pan-Africanism and talking about the clear and concrete ways that revolutionary Pan-Africanism will positively impact every person of African descent everywhere on the planet Earth in concrete and practical ways, right? So Garvey understood this over 100 years ago, and they began to build the UNIA all across the world. And they did that in a number of countries, dozens of countries. They created the Negro World newspaper, which they published in English, Spanish, and French. And they published that in 33 countries across the planet. And by 1924, the UNIA had started the Black Star Line. They purchased 3 ships. They were inexperienced at that. And that, of course, led to great difficulties they had with that project. But they did, at that time, lay claim to becoming the largest African organization before or since that time. There hasn't been another one in the last 100 years that had millions of members like the UNIA. So that's the imprint of Marcus Garvey. Obviously, we'll talk more about it, but just to give those that don't have the basic information about who Garvey was, because there's a ton of misinformation out here, then we wanted to make sure you had that. And then let's go to the Watts Rebellion, which took place on August 11th, 1965, in the area south of downtown Los Angeles, the community known as Watts. And this community, of course, was one of the centers of the industrial boom after World War II. There's a street in Watts called Firestone Boulevard. That's because Firestone Tire and Rubber had large manufacturing operations there in Watts, along with a number of other companies. But by the 1960s, that dried up. Those factories left. And now you had overcrowding, you had no jobs, you had fierce conditions, you had police terrorism as the LAPD began to recruit police from the southern U.S. And you can Google it. They had posters that talked about they wanted white men from the South, because back in those days, you could just openly advertise like that. They wanted white men from the South because they figured those Neanderthals would know how to deal with African people the way they wanted us dealt with repression and an iron fist. So they began to basically engage in systemic repression against our people as we moved in large numbers to the Los Angeles area. At that time, there were approximately 500,000 Africans who were living in Los Angeles, in the city proper, not in the surrounding suburbs, in the city. And so what happened on August 11th, 1965, is a young man, 21-year-old man by the name of Marquette Fry, was pulled over and tested for driving under the influence. Now, it appears that possibly he was under the influence. But what happened is a crowd gathered, and the crowd gathered because they had seen this movie many times where African people on routine traffic stops were brutalized by the LAPD. The LAPD has a widely known reputation internationally. When I've been in other countries and I told them that I've spent a lot of time in LA, they've asked about the LAPD. Everyone knows that. The only people that don't know it are backward ass people in this country. So this happened where the crowd gathered, and the police report is that Marcus Fry began to resist arrest. The reports of the people on the ground there were that never happened. At any rate, there was intense brutality meted out by the police against Marcus Fry, and the people, having seen enough of this, reacted to it and began to hit the streets. And then there were other rumors that happened that talked about the brutality. And as a result, you had 6 days of uprisings. We call it uprisings and rebellions. We don't call it riots, because a riot means people just go off for no reason. And there's a long history of police terrorism against our people in every city in the world, not just in Los Angeles. In every city in the world, there's a history of that, not just the U.S. In every city in the world, in the last 10 years, we African people have had uprisings. Look it up. Maybe it's 15 years, but we've had uprisings against police terrorism in cities in the United States. We've had it in Toronto, Canada. It's happened in Melbourne and Sydney, Australia. It's happened in Germany. It's happened all over the world. Paris, France, London, England. This is a constant phenomenon that our people face all over the world. And there are reasons for that that are related to the necessity to keep African people down and repressed so that they can continue to steal our wealth. And our wealth is nowhere except in Africa. So this is what happened on August 11th, 1965. And 6 days later, from that date, there were 15,000 National Guard troops that were deployed to Los Angeles. And there were reported 34 deaths. And in most of the urban rebellions, those deaths occurred because the police shot people. And they made up all kind of reasons why they shot the people. I mean, if you believe the police, I don't. You believe police, I don't have words for you. But this is what they said, and this is what happened. And that was unfortunately one of many. That was one of the very first of many urban rebellions in the 1960s in this country. Hundreds of urban rebellions in communities where African people live. This is why you have gentrification today. Gentrification was one of the many strategies designed to break up African communities as a method of control. Right. So that's what happened. You had Harlem that went up in flames in the summer of 1964. And then you had Watts in 1965. And then you had hundreds after that. So this was a thing. So the question from that we have to ask is, what are the connections between the movement that Marcus Garvey helped initiate and the Watts Rebellion in 1965? Because these things happened 80 years apart. Right. So what was the common factor? Right. And we know it's more than just August. Yes, Marcus Garvey was born in August in 1888, August 17th. And yes, as I mentioned, the Watts Rebellion happened on August 11th, 1965. But that doesn't speak to the commonalities between these two phenomenons. What does speak to it is understanding the forces that repress African people in this country and the world, and understanding the sources of those forces, and understanding that their mission is consistently the same. That's where the commonalities come in. So when we look at the Garvey movement, we know that the Department of Justice was formed in the late 19s. It came into full fruition in 1919. And the first appointed director of the Department of Justice, which later changed its name to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, was a 24-year-old man named J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover, of course, went on to spend 54 years into the 1970s as the director of the FBI. And most of you that know that name, that would listen to a program like this, you probably know J. Edgar Hoover from his role in initiating the counterintelligence program of the FBI in 1967, which was aimed at disrupting and destroying militant African organizations in this country. Of course, he was definitely a central figure in that, along with his flunkies, William Sullivan and Cartha DeLoach and those FBI officials at that time. Richard Held and all of those terrorists, they were responsible for the vision of COINTELPRO and the carrying out and implementation of that very sinister program. But before that, Hoover started with his first objective as the newly appointed leader of the Department of Justice in 1919, which was to destabilize the UNIA and the Garvey movement. And so this was done by a number of means. The first method was Garvey was engaged in Pan-African work. I mean, many people today, some African woman, confused African woman, said to me the other day, Pan-Africanism has never done anything for us. And, I said, you have you ever read a single book about it? And I said, don't even answer because I know you haven't. Because anyone that has could never make a dumb statement like that. If you look at the history, and this history is documented in so many places. I mean, I just saw today that Ward Churchill, uh, a member of the American Indian movement and the professor at the University of Colorado, made his physical transition. And he and another professor named Jim Vanderhill released a landmark book in 1987 entitled The FBI's Secret War Against the Black Panther Party and the American Indian Movement. It's a must read for anyone who wants to understand the FBI's counterintelligence program. If you haven't read that book, you got to read that book. The FBI's Secret War Against the Black Panther Party and the American Indian Movement by Ward Churchill and Jim Vanderhill. I read it the day it came out. I bought it. I was waiting in line for the bookstore to open in 1987, and I bought that book and I read it in 2 days. And I read countless books on COINTELPRO, but that one really made it clear what the objective of that program was. And one of the things they talked about in the book, laying out the foundation for the 1960s, is the work that Hoover did against the Garvey movement in the 19s and the early 20s. And what Garvey was doing in terms of Pan-African work is Garvey was working on building a relationship with the president of Liberia at that time. And the president of Liberia, President King, wanted to expand Liberia's reach. Liberia produces rubber. They have large rubber plantations in Liberia. And of course, rubber products go from everything from sneakers to tires to a whole bunch of things that you use. And so Garvey went to the Liberian government, went to King, and he said, we should make this effort an African effort. I'm born in Jamaica. I'm here, talking to you. They didn't have internet then, so they had to talk via letters. Garvey never traveled to Africa. He never physically set foot on the African continent. So they sent letters back and forth. And through that process, Garvey convinced King that I can supply engineers. They can help you with the rubber production. They can help you create revenues that, we can own this process and we don't have to share this or have it controlled by the European colonizers. And this idea initially had some appeal for King. It certainly had appeal for the Liberian people, which is probably the only reason why King was considering it in the first place. And so there was an initial agreement that they would begin to work together to develop the rubber plantations. The FBI, or at that time, the Department of Justice, and J. Edgar Hoover got wind of this. And they understood that they had to do everything they could to sabotage this relationship. They could not have African people linking up all over the world to control Africa's resources. That would represent chaos and devastation for the capitalist world, who relies on cheap African human and material resources to maintain its profitability. They couldn't have that. So their responsibility was to sabotage this. And they did it in two efforts. One is that they initially were able to convince King and Liberia to sever relationships with Garvey, and in exchange, the FBI would ensure, because at that time there was no Central Intelligence Agency, that the CIA didn't start until 1948. So the Department of Justice at that time, and later the FBI until 1948, was the only intelligence agency domestically and internationally for the U.S. So what Hoover told King and the Liberian government is, if you sever relationships with Marcus Garvey, I will prevent France from invading Liberia. France wanted to invade Liberia at the time because France is a wicked terrorist colonial power, number one. And two, they wanted to control that rubber production that was there. So King agreed to this. Relationships were severed with Liberia, between Liberia and the UNIA. It was a major blow against the Garvey movement to its followers. Of course, they didn't understand at the time that it was the FBI facilitating this. So from the standpoint of the millions of workers within the UIA, it just looked like it was just not feasible that we could achieve this kind of goal in our organization. And that was one of the major objectives of Hoover and the Department of Justice / FBI, was to demoralize the UNIA membership. And of course, France went on to invade Vietnam partially because of their interest in the rubber in Vietnam. And this led to France getting in a struggle in Vietnam that they couldn't get out of. And that's largely the reason why the US went to war in Vietnam. So indirectly, that's related to our struggle as African people in the Garvey movement. But the point is that the other thing that Hoover and his wicked organization did is they went and they were able to engage in sabotage against the Garvey movement. And they had people, the Garvey movement had no political education, so they attracted everybody. And unfortunately, our people, there is class struggle within our people. We're not a monolith. There are many Africans who side with the capitalist class and want nothing more than to either be a part of the capitalist class, which the chances of that are slim to none, but at the very least, be able to become petty bourgeoisie or even possibly bourgeoisie spokespersons for the capitalist class, because those roles come with great rewards. So a lot of our people, that's all they want to accomplish in life. A lot of these Negroes talking about division among our people are really just looking for a payday. And a lot of our people are just looking for a payday. So this was the reality. So a lot of the people in the UNIA just wanted to use the UNIA to pad their own pockets. And so you had people in the UNIA who were engaged in mail fraud. Now, it needs to be stated, you cannot find a single organization and company anywhere that doesn't have some instance of that sort of thing happening. That's just what happens. But the FBI is not investigating all of those companies. It's not investigating all of those banks. It doesn't care. It's investigating organizations like the UNIA who pose a threat to the capitalist status quo. So once they were able to identify that this was happening in the UNIA, they framed Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey had nothing to do with using U.S. mail to defraud people out of money. Those were just people in the organization, and Hoover knew that. But they framed Marcus Garvey, and that's how they were able to arrest Garvey, which essentially meant the great decline of the UNIA. And by 1927, Garvey was deported to Europe, where he lived with Great Depression until he died in 1940. So that was unfortunately the strategy of these capitalists in order to destroy the Pan-African work that Garvey was engaged in. And you can see there the sign in Liberia talking about Firestone, Rubber and Tire. What happened after one of the negotiated elements that came from running Garvey out of a relationship with Liberia was to ensure the president of Liberia that a U.S. company could come in and fill that void in helping them develop that rubber, and that the Liberian officials could rely on getting rich as a result of working with this company. So that's what appealed to these people. I just made it clear that we've always had people like that. They're not interested in the collective liberation of our people. They're interested in lining their pockets. And so Firestone went in to Liberia in 1924, signed a 100-year contract that just expired 2 years ago in 2024, and they re-signed another 100-year contract to control rubber production in Liberia. And Firestone at that time controlled much of the rubber production all over Africa, right? Firestone, Rubber and Tire, Bridgestone, those criminals. And in Ghana, during the socialist period of Kwame Nkrumah and the Convention People's Party, 1960 to 1966, until the CIA overthrew his government in February 1966, they had a tire production apparatus in Ghana, a socialist-run tire production apparatus that outperformed Firestone's work in Liberia and other parts of Africa. And when Nkrumah's government was overthrown, then the traitors who worked with the CIA to overthrow in Cuba's government, sold the land to Firestone in Takoradi, Ghana, and Firestone immediately closed the tire facility. They didn't open another factory, they closed it. And it hasn't been open since. It's still there with the same antiquated equipment from 1966. I've been there. I've been to that tire factory in Takoradi, Ghana. It has analog equipment in there because it's from 1966. They had their intention was they didn't want another socialist project to come into Ghana and outperform them again, because one of the main fears of the capitalist system is they don't want people that live in these capitalist countries to know that their lives could be so much better under a socialist society. They want to convince you that there's no way that would be possible. So that's why they hide all of the accomplishments of socialism. This is why you got to ask yourself the question, why are they so concerned about a little poor island in the Caribbean named Cuba? Why do they put so much effort and resources into sabotaging Cuba? Why would they, if socialism is such a failure, if it's so doomed to fail, why would they spend 62 years engaged in economic sabotage against Cuba? If you have an enemy and you say, well, they're my enemy because they're an evil person, why would you need to constantly smear that person? If they're an evil person, let them live, and people will clearly see that on their own. But if you're constantly smearing that person, an intelligent person at some point has to say, maybe it's you that's the evil one. It looks like you're the one that's evil. So if the U.S. is constantly sabotaging Cuba, y'all got to ask the question, why is that? What is it that they're afraid of that Cuba will do? I mean, we've done plenty of programs on Cuba. You got to do the research if you don't know it. But we're just saying that that's clearly what a part of their strategy is, to sabotage socialism. And then when we look at the question of the Watts Rebellion, just like the sabotage inflicted against the Garvey movement, the Watts Rebellion reflects the same type of sabotage. These rebellions are a result of this same systemic sabotage against our people that was meted out against the Garvey movement. And the root of that is we have to ask ourselves another question. And that question is the problem we face really anti-Blackness? Is that what it is? Is it the problem we face is white supremacy? Does it happen because Europeans just hate us because we're Black? Is that really what it is? Is that all there is to it? They just hate us because we're Black? Because there really is very little hard evidence to substantiate that claim. If you think about it. Now, I know a lot of this is led by emotion. We lead a lot with emotion. We lead a lot with trauma. And that benefits our enemies, because if you're leading with trauma and emotion, you will not have the intellectual maturity to cognitively factor out what's going on in a logical fashion. You just won't be able to do that. You'll be reacting to everything. And that's a lot of what we do, is react. We do a lot of reacting. And so I want to ask us to think about this question. Is it really just anti-Blackness? And when I say there's hard evidence that that's not true, the evidence is that everything, there are people, open mouth people, poets, rappers have said this for years. They like everything about being Black except us. So clearly it's not anti-Blackness. Clearly that's not it. They will steal how we talk. They will steal how we dress, how we dance, how we make jokes. They want to be entertained by us. They have there's nothing of any excitement that they can participate in. The sporting events are no good without us and the flash and style in which we engage in our competitiveness. The entertainment industry is nothing without us. Everything that happens in the TV and movies, every scene we're in, we dominate. You can't point to any scene that has an African and a European in it where the European is dominating us. It's just not going to happen. We're going to be the dominant force in that environment, and they know that. And they have many of them who understand how capitalism works, instead of being offended by it, have figured out ways to profit off of it. That's why you see so much coon activity on television and in the movies, because they perpetuate that to the point of, making it almost obscene, but they do that. So clearly, there right now, I live in California. It's warm here. It's summertime. I can go to any beach. I don't even I live in Sacramento. The beach is 80 minutes away from me, the coast in San Francisco. But I can go to the river right now here because there are two rivers that flow through this city. And there are countless Europeans out there laying in the sun, trying to get dark. So there's no evidence about this anti-blackness. They will talk like what's that stupid girl's name? Vicky, whatever the hell her name is, talks just like somebody that grew up in the inner city, right? Someone who's standing in front of a liquor store, right? Nothing against that, because there's nothing against every aspect of who we are. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying these people imitate it, whatever it is. That's my point. They imitate it. So there must be something to it if somebody's always willing to imitate, even though they try to act like it's so primitive and that, it's such a reduction in intelligence. They're constantly imitating it. They're constantly imitating it. Now, I can understand why Africans imitate the so-called proper way of talking, the European style of linguistics, because that's how you have to do that to make it in this society. But you get no social benefits imitating anything about African people. So if people are doing that, which millions of people are, it's because it's cooler. They like it. They want to be like that. It's something that makes them feel more alive, right? So clearly it can't just be anti-blackness, you all. Clearly that's not it. I would argue that it's not anti-blackness at all. It's anti-Africa. That's what it is. And it's not coming from the poor, dumb redneck on the street. They're not driving this issue. Well, they hate us because we're Black. If you believe that, it's because you think that these everyday white people out here are defining this issue. They don't define a damn thing. Everything they believe has been conditioned into them, just like it has into us. And a major part of the conditioning is to refute and deny Africa. And the reason why that is a thing is because the capitalist power structure is rooted in exploiting Africa. It has to do that. Right now, they've got so many smelting plants being propped up in Africa. There's so much mining taking place. All of the lithium, all of the cobalt, all of those things, uranium. If we recognize that we're African, then the next thing that would happen is we would have a connection to Africa. And the next thing that would happen after that is we would begin to question, why is Africa the richest land base in the world, richer minerally than the rest of the world combined? You can put Africa on the right side. You can put all of the Americas, North, Central, South America, the Caribbean. You can put Asia. You can put Europe. You can put all of that on the left side. Africa has more natural resources than all of those other places combined. So the question would have to be, why is Africa poor then? And the answer is because it's constantly being looted. Don't talk to me about somebody taking a TV in a blackout. I'm talking about capitalism's looting of Africa over the last 500 plus years, which is the reason why we're poor everywhere we are on the planet Earth, and the reason why they're rich everywhere they are on the planet Earth. But they don't want you to see what I just said, so they tell you, yeah, it's anti-Black. It's that we don't like you because you're Black. That's it. Well, what about Africa? We don't talk about Africa. In fact, people in Africa don't even like you. They don't want anything to do with you. So you don't want anything to do with them. And they tell you that, and there's a plethora of ignorance on the internet of people. And we're going to talk about this in great detail next week, where all that's coming from on the internet. Because if you work out here in this society like I do, you don't see that. You don't see that anti-Africa stuff on the ground. You don't see that. You don't have most of the people that come to an event speak saying we ain't African. You don't even hear that. When you go, if you went to Juneteenth anywhere, didn't matter where you went, you saw Africa everywhere at Juneteenth. So clearly this social media anti-African campaign is a coordinated effort. It'll come out I don't want to give away what we're going to talk about next week, but clearly that's a coordinated effort. So that's what's happening. And the reason why I had to go through the steps of explaining all of that is because what's important for us to understand is that the reason why, the way that they perpetuate and protect their interests in Africa and ensure that they're able to continue to steal everything from Africa, and we won't even notice because we're trying to get a $5 check in America for what they did to us here. And we won't even notice the billions they're stealing from Africa because we want $1,000 that they'll take from us, that we'll spend right back with them as soon as they give it to us. You know, they want us to be focused on that small time stuff, that small time thing, because America, the U.S. is small time. So if you just focus on the U.S., that's small time thinking. The future of the world is not in the U.S. Everybody knows that. The only people on earth who don't know that are Africans in the U.S. Everybody else in the world knows that. All the major world economists say the future is Africa. All the major world political scientists say the future is Africa. All of the health organizations, the United Nations, the African Union, all of these entities, the International Monetary Fund, they all talk about what's going to be happening in Africa. Just Google what I just said. You don't believe us? Go to the white man, since you believe everything that he says. Google what the white man says about it. Google his AI, and he'll tell you that they're all looking to the future of Africa. So if you have one working brainstem in your head, that should tell you why they don't want us to focus on Africa. That's what it is. And so they know that there are going to be people like us, but they're not really that concerned about people like us right now because they know most of you are not listening to us. So the way that they deal with you is through political repression. And this is why they engage us the way they do in the inner cities where we're mostly located in this country. That's why there's such a thing as police terrorism, to keep their foot on our neck, because they want to make sure that they control us, because an uncontrolled African people is an unleashed African people, and an unleashed African people is a people that will unite with all of us who are suffering from the same thing, and recognizing that and building the unity that will end this nightmare once and for all. So this is why they do this to us. And they have all these tactics to ensure that we stay confused and disunited. So what happened on August 11th, 1965 in Los Angeles and Watts was a reflection of that. And a couple of years later, you had over 300 urban rebellions after the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on April 4th, 1968. These crackers didn't just sit back and say, oh, the Negroes are upset. They strategize, you all. They're not like us. They don't just react and then go get a plate of ribs and sit down for several years. They don't do that. That's what we do. When those rebellions happened in 1968, they got to work. The crackers got to work. They formed a commission. First, Lyndon Johnson put together the Kerner Commission. The Kerner Commission was comprised of these so-called intellectuals, and they did a study. They went into the inner cities, the urban areas. They surveyed thousands of people. They did analysis. They did experiments. They came back and produced a report called the Kerner Report. And the Kerner Report said that at that time, 1968, these crackers were scared. This country was burning up. They said there's two Americas, one white, one black. And if something isn't done to address that problem, the words they used, the urban rebellions that were happening at the time, would just be a pregame show to what would happen, paraphrasing them. And so these crackers read that and they got to work. And they did their own study using the Kerner Report. And what they decided, they got together. Richard Nixon was president at that time. He got another commission together that he recruited David Rockefeller. Now, check this out. The Rockefeller family has historically been patriarchs in the Democratic Party. Richard Nixon was a Republican. So that should tell you right there, like that's a bunch of bullshit. The Republicans, the Democrats, they're all a part of the capitalist class, and you're not. So that should tell you something right there. So he got David Rockefeller together, along with McGeorge Bundy, who was the CEO of the Ford Foundation, and many of these other leading figures here in this society. And they got together, and when they studied the Kerner report, what they concluded is the problem is that we had an African petty bourgeoisie class, but it was very small. And they concluded that we needed to increase the African petty bourgeoisie class, because if we did that, we would create a class of African people who had experienced some success within the capitalist system. And because of that, they would feel the necessity to defend and protect the capitalist system, not burn it down. So this is where affirmative action came from. The latest iteration of affirmative action, getting y'all to have access to college education, getting y'all to have set aside minority contracts in business, doing all these things so that you would have the opportunity to go to school. And clearly it's happened. You know, we integrated the sports. Now you got all these millionaire athletes, all these millionaire entertainers, and they're all right wing. This is what I'm explaining to you is where you got what's the dumbass girl's name? I can't even remember her name right now. The rapper, Nicki Minaj, where you got her dumbass, where you got Jay-Z and Beyonce and 50 Cent and Kanye West. This is where all these dumbass graham crackers came from. Is through this process I just explained to you, as well as all these Negro millionaires, Tyler Perry and all this bullshit, and Akite Dangote in Nigeria, and all the ones throughout Africa. This is where all this shit came from, because they want to give you the illusion that you can make progress in this society, and then they wanted to create a class of people who would tell you that you don't need to resist, you just need to invest more in this backward-ass system. So this is why you have this. This is where you got Barack Obama. It was all about getting you to believe that the best chance you have is within the capitalist system. And obviously they've been very successful at this, because when you go, I go out and organize African people, and I'm telling you, the only thing you hear in our communities in this country, that's why I can't wait to leave here. I love it when I go home to Africa, because all the work I'm trying to do here, all you hear about is entrepreneurship. All you hear about is wealth building, and these Negroes ain't building no wealth, and they ain't entrepreneuring a goddamn thing. I'm not talking about people that go out and do work in the community, support our events, and sell things to. I'm not talking about them. Those are wonderful people. I'm talking about these black graham crackers who want to imitate the capitalist system and model their business model after the capitalist system, and then try to convince you that they're doing something to help African people when they own restaurants and all this stuff. Magic Johnson owns these Starbucks and all the whatever else he owns, Krispy Kreme, whatever the hell he owns. And you think that he's paying his employees in these places more than minimum wage because they're African? You're out of your damn mind if that's what you believe. He's paying them the same thing the white people that own those places are paying them. So how is he any better? He's not giving them any medical benefits. How is he any better? He's not better. Like, he's just imitating the capitalist system. Y'all got to understand how this stuff works, and stop. We got to stop talking like we don't have a brain in our head. This is how the capitalist system works. You can't refute what I'm saying right now. You can get mad or disagree or shut this program off, but you cannot refute it. It is 100% true. And that's how they keep control over our communities. So this is why you had a Barack Obama. That's why you had Kamala Harris. That's why you have all these coons on social media talking like they're talking. There's a payday involved for them and their families and the people they want to, they're building wealth, all right. Bitcoin, all this stuff is designed to keep us tethered to this backward ass capitalist system. That's the whole point of it. And to keep us separated from Africa, because even though we know nothing about it, I watched a coon yesterday. Every video I've seen in Africa, I don't want nothing to do with it. I mean, the fact that he could say something like that, and most of you see his videos, and you, instead of saying, well, how can you look at a video and make a determination about a continent of 2 billion people based on one video or 10 videos? How could you do that? Instead of you knowing how to say that, most of us are, well, yeah, I see the video too. That's crazy. I ain't want nothing to do with that. I mean, this is nonsense. This is absolute insanity that passes as intellectualism, right? People that haven't read a book since they were forced to do it in high school. And that's probably a lot of you listening to this. But that's got to change. That's the only way we change this situation we're in. So the connecting cable to all of this, the comparison between Garvey and the Watts Rebellion, the comparison between anything you could bring to me, it's always going to come back to Africa. And the reason why is because, like, if you can see the picture, it talks about all of the resources in Africa. I said it. Africa is the most resource-rich region in the world. It's more resource. There are more resources in Africa that are utilized by these corporations all over the world than in all these other land bases combined. And they have to ensure that they can continue to access that oil, that lithium for the car batteries, that cobalt for your cell phone, that coltan for the internet, that uranium for electricity, that gold, that diamonds for your jewelry, that zinc to bend steel to build your cars, all of those things. They have to make sure they can access those resources cheaply, because that's how they make their profit. There are many countries in other parts of the world that have those things, but they don't have access to it. That's why they're after Venezuela, because Venezuela has large deposits of lithium. But Venezuela is still resisting the U.S. Don't believe what they're telling you. All they did was kidnap 2 people from Venezuela. They didn't overturn the system. They didn't do anything. So they're not letting them exploit the lithium there. So they're in the Congo and Mozambique and all of those places doing it. There's nothing to stop them from doing that there, other than one Negro graham cracker leader who's sold out to them years ago. And if they haven't, if they just got in, they'll sell out to them tomorrow. So this is why they want to keep you separated from Africa, because by doing that, they have unfettered access to all those resources. They can bring, all they got to do is steal the resources, put them in the goddamn Android and the Apple iPhone, and we're so damn dumb here. We're excited just to be able to pay them more money to get the damn phone that should have been our phone in the first place. That's how crazy we are today. So this is the reality. They had to crush Garvey's work, because despite the errors of the Black Star Line, and there were errors, and the weaknesses in the dialogue between Garvey and King in Liberia, there were weaknesses. The potential is what these people were concerned about. We could strengthen the relationships. We could strengthen our understanding of how to purchase ships. We could strengthen our ability to build relationships in Africa, and they know that. So they got to wipe out any possibility of it. And that's why they aggressively dismantle any effort like that we make. And then by the same token, international capital, it understands, in order for it to continue to control the African masses in the U.S., who are mostly in the urban areas, they got to do this through propaganda. They got a constant, that's why I'm telling you, these anti-Africa campaigns are coordinated by these people. They're the ones funding them. Like, you know, so a lot of these Africans in here, they got all, you look at them, they got all this now. You know, I have equipment here to do this program. They got equipment worth 3 times as much as my equipment. I don't have cheap equipment. 3 times as much as my equipment. And I'm listening to them and they're ooba gaba gooba. Like, you don't even have a job. So how the hell are you getting all that stuff? You know, I mean, this is a coordinated campaign to keep us confused. No question about it. Coordinated campaign. Oh my God, the Africa. I don't want nothing to do with Africa. And if you put a gun to his head and said spell Africa, you'd have to squeeze the trigger. So when the propaganda doesn't work, like It didn't work in LA in 1965, and it doesn't work in all of these urban rebellions, because as Jamil Abdullah Alameen, our recently departed ancestor who was formerly H. Rap Brown, what he said in the 60s, the rebellions are dress rehearsal for the revolution. And that's how the system looks at it. And so if that doesn't work, propaganda, they will go to other means. That's fascist violence against us in our communities. And the police are instrument to do that. The military is their instrument to do it as well. They'll do that. They'll do anything to stop us from connecting the dots. And the only way we stop that is we got to understand that we aren't Americans. We never have been Americans, and you never will be Americans. Like Malcolm X said, if you were an American, there wouldn't be any voter suppression. They wouldn't have to pass laws to protect your rights. The fact that they still got to do all that in 2026, that tells any of us who have a single brain cell operating that we're not Americans. We never could be. We never will be that. We're still Africans. As Malcolm told us, if a cat has kittens in an oven, that doesn't make them biscuits. We're still Africans. And I don't care how much fantasy you want to believe in and how much reality you want to ignore. When you step out of your house and this society sees you, this society is looking at an African. And if you want to preserve your safety of yourself and your family and your community, the best thing you can do is stop with your head in the sand and recognize that. And we thank you for joining us today. We invite you back next week. As I mentioned, we're going to do this program, Irrefutable Evidence that We Are African, but actually it's going to be, where is this and I ain't no African mindset coming from? That's really what the title of it is. So we invite you back next week, same time, same platforms. You can go to the QR code, the red and white one in the upper left, and you can find out what programs are happening. You can go to the Forward Ever shop, which is great. You can buy clothes that support the African Revolution, like this shirt I have on right here. It says African. That's where I got it. African period, because that's who we are. So if you support that message, I endorse it 100%. Then go to the Forward Ever shop, the red and white QR code. You can go to hoodcommunist.org, which is a revolutionary Pan-African blog. We want you to go there and support that. If you're here in the Northern California area, every Thursday we have community self-defense. You can come. It's free of charge. You don't have to register. You just got to bring yourself in a positive attitude, and we will help you learn how to stretch properly. We will help you learn how to throw proper punches, proper kicks. We'll help you learn how to get someone off of you, how to defend yourself and your loved ones. These people are coming after us. And you running around here with 911, ready to dial 911, and you call them and they come and it's worse for you when they get there. That's a terrible safety plan. So come on out. If you're not in Sacramento, then tell people you know here to come. Join the AAPRP, www.aaprp-intl.org. You can do that there. And the black and white QR code in the bottom right, scan that and become a monthly sponsor to the Thomas Sankara Center for Pan-African Unity. That one is in Burkina Faso. We're asking you to become a monthly sponsor, whatever you can afford, so that we can buy the revolutionary literature we need in the Sahel region to facilitate our work. And right now we're doing that work in Burkina Faso, in Niger, and expanding. So do that. And then my book in the upper right-hand corner, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. This book is a great organizing book. I'm just not going to be falsely modest. It's a good book in terms of step-by-step how you organize. But and there are plenty of people who've written reviews. If you scan the QR code right next to it, I there's no way I can know all those people, y'all. There's like dozens of people who've written positive reviews about it. There's hater reviews too, but you should get the book. It's only $8 and it's $5 digital. 100%, not 80, not 90, 100% of the proceeds go toward towards the anti-fascist work that we do. We're in the process of organizing additional anti-fascist work here in Sacramento, and I train people in other areas on how to do that as well. The self-defense class is obviously one of the features of that. So if you want us to be able to expand those opportunities, help us by buying the book. You can, if you bought the book, we thank you, but we ask you to ask others to buy it. Call your local African bookstore, any bookstore, and ask them to buy it. They can buy it. They can scan that QR code and buy it. It's only $8. They can sell it for twice that much and make a significant return. People will buy it for twice that much. So my wife goes to events sometimes and sells it for twice that much. So I know people will buy it. So you can do. They can do that at the bookstores. Get your libraries to order it and help us do this work. Forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your day. Shakur will be back with me next week.